The Trans-Alaska Pipeline is one of the most famous examples of a midstream operation in the oil industry. The pipeline transports crude oil from oil fields along Prudhoe Bay on the north slope of Alaska to Port Valdez, Alaska, some 800 miles or 1,300 kilometers away. Able to carry more than 2 million barrels of crude per day, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline is a supersized example of a crude oil transmission pipeline. Transmission pipelines are fed by much smaller pipelines that gather the crude produced at multiple oil wells. The transmission pipeline then moves the crude to either a refinery, a large crude oil storage site, or, as in the case of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, to a seaport terminal. At seaport terminals, the crude is loaded onto oil tankers for ocean transport to another part of the country or another country altogether. Crude oil tankers are the largest of the ships used by the oil industry to transport crude and/or refined petroleum products. The lengths of the largest crude tankers rival the world's tallest buildings. And such ships hold a tremendous amount of oil. An ultra-large crude carrier can hold up to 3 million barrels of oil. This is equivalent to the daily oil consumption in 2013 of Brazil, the country that was the world's 6th largest consumer of oil that year. Oil tankers will unload their crude directly to shore if the offloading port is deep enough. Otherwise, they will stay offshore and be unloaded by lightering vessels, which are smaller ships with shallower drafts that shuttle the crude from the tanker to the receiving terminal. The receiving terminal may be a coastal refinery or another transmission pipeline that will transport the crude to one or more refineries located inland from the coast. This transport may involve short to long interludes during which the crude is temporarily stored until refineries are ready to process it. Short-term storage is handled by large oil tanks located on-site at refineries or at transmission pipeline interchanges where the crude can be transferred from one pipeline to another, such as in Cushing, Oklahoma. The longest term and largest storage of crude occurs in underground caverns, such as the hollowed-out salt domes that hold the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The picture you see here is of an injection site into one of those salt domes. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPRO, is an emergency supply of crude for the U.S. It was established by the U.S. federal government in the event the country was unable to import a sufficient supply of crude from the international market. The midstream sector completes its connection of the upstream and downstream sectors of the oil industry once the crude is delivered to a refinery. However, the midstream sector comes into play again in delivering refined petroleum products to market. The midstream moves the petroleum products from refineries to product terminals using ships and/or distribution pipelines, which are separate from the transmission pipelines that carry crude oil. The petroleum products moved along distribution pipelines are delivered in discrete injections or slugs. Similar types of these products can be safely injected into the pipeline one after another, such as low and high octane gas. Any zone of mixing that occurs between the product slugs during pipeline transport can be incorporated into the lower grade product or sent back to the refinery for reprocessing. Other petroleum products, however, must be kept separate, such as jet fuel. For these products, a free-moving plastic plug is inserted into the pipeline between injections that can't be mixed. Because such plugs make a squeaking sound as they are pushed along through the pipe by the product flow, they are called pigs. The delivery of refined petroleum products is handled by a control room. The control room schedules which products are to be delivered where and when. Then, with the help of sensors, the control room tracks the movements of the products through the pipeline system, alerting product terminals as to when particular products are arriving. The terminals store the different petroleum products in separate storage tanks. These are then used to fill tanker trucks, which deliver the products for final sale. Knowing now how the midstream connects the up and downstream sectors of the oil industry, it's worth looking at the scale of this entire infrastructure here in the United States. This figure is a map of all on- and offshore oil wells in the contiguous U.S. The ship symbols indicate the locations of crude oil and refined petroleum water ports. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is held in 4 locations along the U.S. Gulf Coast beneath all the oil well symbols. There is also a reserve of refined petroleum fuels located at sites in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Transmission pipelines move the crude from the oil wells and ports to refineries. Petroleum products produced from the crude are then carried from the refineries to petroleum product terminals. All told, there's enough storage in the U.S. to hold some 730 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products. There is also 50,000 miles of crude oil transmission pipelines and greater than 87,000 miles of refined product pipeline. If laid end to end, the 2 sets of pipelines could be wrapped around the circumference of the Earth 5.5 times.